Checo moved under braking to start off with.
World champion, and Sergio's up there with him. I said, you got to take Sergio. Vijay eventually agreed with me, and we took Sergio.
Can you not, though, look at $40 million and go, Sergio is 0.2 faster on average, but $40 million buys us 0.4 of speed? Is there not that equation to do?
There is that equation to do, but it's just amazing how 0.2 in a driver motivates the whole team, more so than 40 million that you spend in the tunnel. Am I right?
Yeah, totally. I think if you get the driver is always I don't want to call it the final jigsaw puzzle, but it's always that key piece in getting the team to believe in themselves. We just talked about the team believing themselves. It just motivates the whole team when you put a top driver in there, and that top driver also wants to come to, or a better driver, and they want to come to your team and work with you all. Makes you feel motivated, definitely.
More so than the 40 million bucks in the tunnel. Yeah, it definitely important, especially when you don't have it and you think, bah.
Yeah.
The one thing and I couldn't believe this when I got to Force India, we didn't have much money at all. And they would skimp on things like resin for the SLA machines.
What's an SLA machine?
Stereolithography. It's
a rapid prototype machine.
Yeah, it's
you can make things really quickly.
Yeah, it's a 3D printer for parts. And if your 3D printers weren't printing, and you mainly printed wind tunnel parts with those things, not parts for the real car. Now we're starving the wind tunnel of parts that should make the car go faster, and doing the experiments in the tunnel to confirm that it will make the part. We're starving our development. And I kept saying, this is all wrong. You can't starve the learning. Even if you don't make that part in full size to put on the car because you don't have the money, you can't starve the learning.
No. But why were they doing that?
Because they're trying to save money.
Oh, okay.
And the thinking was wrong.
Yeah.
I'd rather have money to, when I do get a development, to put it on the car. And I said, forget that. Never stop the learning. If we suddenly do get the money, then what you're putting on the car is actually a huge gap from where you started. So one of the first things I've changed when I was there.
What were you going to tell us about Sergio?
Well, I first come across Sergio when he was very young, when he was just first into Formula One, and he was in Sauber, and we had and Sauber had the Ferrari engine, so he used to come to our place.
You had a collaboration with him.
Yep, that's right. And he used to come to our place and do simulator. And I didn't really know him very well to start off with. And I used to say to the guys, "Oh, what's he like? Is he?" And all the guys, all the simulator guys, used to say, he is, because he's a gent, right? He's a really nice guy, but also he's really handy." And we saw that in Sauber, like towards, I can't remember what
He's
season.
quick.
Yeah, he's very quick. But also he was a very hard worker. He used to come with a really big work ethic and just massively enthusiastic about the whole thing, quite infectious. And I was just to stop and chat with him, when I went on, he kind of went to McLaren, then to Force India. And I always, I haven't seen him for a long time. Since he was in Red Bull, but I always used to stop and chat with him. Really nice guy.
Great guy.
Really good guy. And I remember a good story, actually. We were in Canada, and I don't know what year this was. It must have been 14 and 15, and our two cars come together. Do you remember the Williams and the...
I remember. That was Massa and Force India.
Yeah.
And we got penalized, which we shouldn't have done.
And Force India, and it was Checo, and Checo moved under braking, so they clearly should have got penalized,
No.
right?
Absolutely not. He had to move under braking because there was a corner there. You can't go straight.
Anyway, so what happened was, we'll let the stewards decide this one. So we went to the stewards, and we went to stewards heating, and Steve-O was there. Andy Stevenson came with Checo, and I went with Felipe. And
which biased stewards were they?
They were
which biased?
Ridiculous. Anyway. So we went there.
Do you genuinely believe that it was the wrong decision? And you go on. Yeah, no, finish your story. Sorry. Finish your story.
I did because this is about Checo before. So I was obviously very well prepared for this, right? And
Steve-O wasn't. That louse.
He is. He's Andy Stevenson. You are lazy by your
What
ex-boss.
does being well prepared for it mean?
Oh, he just went with like tons
Bunch
of
of
like
bollocks. I mean,
tons of
made
paperwork.
up-
Like
made
we
up.
showed like how he'd moved under braking. We showed where we were like alongside and how he wasn't allowed to move. Blah blah.
Everything they can to fuck your driver.
So everything. So we were
Made up.
perfectly prepared. And of course, you know, Otmar's team, they turned up bit of a ramshackle. You know, not quite used to the big time like we were. Anyway, so we and as we come out,
It's for a podium, you know.
I thought it was for a podium, and neither of us ended up on the podium. Both of us ended up with no wheels on the car, right?
Yeah,
We're
because
pretty-
Massa
it
hit
was
us, but
fucking huge accident. Anyway, as we come out, you know, it's a little bit like there's a little bit of animosity in the room. And then as we walked out and we were walking down the stairs, Checo, he's such a gent, and he turned around to me and he went, "You are very good at this." Like, give me a wink.
Did he? Because
Yeah.
he got reported in the paper that you and Sergio had a row over it and fallen out over it.
No, we didn't have a row. I think I was quite vocal afterwards that because what happened was let me jog my memory here. They were telling Checo that there was some radio messages telling Sergio that there was some problem with the car or something like that. I can't remember exactly
that.
what happened. I can't remember.
Autosport. Rob Smedley and Sergio Perez in row over Canadian Grand Prix accident.
Get in there.
Williams believes Force India was irresponsible not to retire Sergio Perez before his crash with Felipe Massa, a charge Perez has slammed as misguided.
Irresponsible when you're about to finish on the podium. No way.
We
Racing.
probably would have. I think.
Racing.
We would have passed Checo easy had he not moved under braking.
You know why I moved? Because the track wasn't straight there. You had to move, otherwise you went off.
So if we look at I'm going to drag out all of the
We should
evidence that we took.
should drag out just the video clip. You know, when we do the shorts,
Yeah,
let's do a short with the video clip of that, and let
Otmar's now
big
producing
accident.
the social content as well, guys.
the fans decide.
let the people decide.
Exactly.
Can you buy the rights then to the Formula One content?
Oh, that's right.
Oh, yeah, we don't own that.
We don't
Oh
own
yeah,
that.
that's a shame.
Don't we own the content of our own cars?
Sadly not.
No, boy.
But it's good to know you're not bitter about what happened in Canada and you're not bearing a grudge or
No,
still
we
carrying it
should've-
all these years later.
We should have finished on the podium there, but at least anyway.
Only because you wanted to go up on the podium. Here
Yeah,
we
you
go.
would have nudged
2014,
Steve out the way.
Massa versus Perez. Probably you at home. Probably that's just an advert. You at home won't be able to see this because we don't have the rights for you to see it. But you two in the studio can watch it.
No, but at
Here
home,
we go.
they can bring it
They
up.
can. They can. Come on, you daft thing. All the angles.
2014.
Massa versus Perez.
Goes into the even Crofty said it was your fault.
Oh my god! It
Crofty will
it
be
literally
up.
looked like Massa just drove into him there. That was a massive crash.
So
That was a
slow,
big.
slow,
Watch. See. Did he move?
Yeah, but look where the corner was. He moved like that every lap.
Dude, the track got bent round to the right. Why is he coming?
Every lap he did the same thing, and Massa had been following him for 5 laps.
Anyway,
He
as
knew it was gonna happen.
always. So
Anyway, yeah.
Otmar
So
and
here's the
I-
onboards, here's the
here we-
onboards.
Here we are. Watch him move. Watch him move to the left. Did you see it? Anyway,
That's
as
a
all
horrible accident.
as all we
I want to
could
see
do-
the onboard of your car.
Okay.
watch. He moves the steering.
Watch his steering. Doesn't move. He was hit. Watch his steering. He doesn't move it.
because he
doesn't
didn't
move it.
move because hang on, you said he moved under braking.
He
Because,
didn't. He watched
because
the
the lap
steering wheel.
before, if you watch the lap before,
I tell you, I'm going to call Steve-O after this.
he goes
screwed
well.
this up.
Steve-O was in the briefing with
You made me
me.
turn this off. Jesus Christ.
We're gonna rung him now.
So basically, the lap before, he follows the track as would be the norm. Humphreys,
Humphreys, he did the same
Yeah.
thing lap after lap.
and he
after
didn't.
lap.
Honestly, he didn't.
But
I think
We
Massa,
should get. I tell you who
it
the steward
looks
was.
like
It looks like Massa had like a something in his eye, and he went to rub it.
It looks like does look like Checo goes to the left slightly,
Oi.
doesn't it?
Yeah.
On the outboard, right?
We can only
Which
allow
makes
the
no sense
steward.
because it's a left-hand turn, so he wouldn't have been doing that. On the onboard,
He doesn't move his hands.
the steering wheel, I'd say, and I'm impartial here, by the way. I don't think Checo's steering does this on the
At all. Only after
onboard.
he's hit. Only after he's hit.
Do you
Well,
really,
well-
honestly?
Well, we can only we must
Let's
must allow the stewards to decide, and the stewards decided in our favour.
Do you think
they always make the right
Massa would have
decision?
made the corner?
I think the stewards always make
would
great
Massa have
decisions.
made the corner at that speed?
Yeah, of course he would have done.
way.
You know that. You know
He
that.
was coming at a rate.
No.
They
He
do
wouldn't
that
have
in
been
Formula
able
One
to-
cars.
They
They
had
do.
brakes.
That's
They
where-
usually do that.
Last lap, Canadian Grand Prix, he would have run out of brakes. Lucky Sergio was there for him to hit.
There you go.
If you
That's the
hadn't
real
been hit, would you
story.
have finished? Where would you have finished if you hadn't been hit?
On the podium.
Podium, he
my
was third.
God.
Fucking
And
third,
who was
one
who
lap
was in
to go.
second?
And
Because
that
we
was
were
GP telling him.
who was in second?
Oh,
Because I reckon we would have caught them and passed them as well. We would have been second.
I don't know.
Why were you so quick at that point in the race?
We had a quick car.
Nearly as
We were
quick
always
as ours.
quick.
We were ahead of him.
I love the
We were
fact you
third in
still
the World
can't agree.
Championship.
I love the fact that it literally doesn't matter anymore. It was 12 years ago, and you still can't agree.
That
We're
was
screwed.
we were third in the World Championship that year.
And my other,
Yeah.
Tom
You were good
Christensen.
wherever you were, man.
Tom Christensen. Tom Christensen, who was the steward. Come on, Tom Christensen. How many times did he won Le Mans?
yeah,
900.
Mr. Audi.
yeah.
He was the steward, and he decided. Tom,
Yeah.
top guy, right decision.
Yeah, won Le Mans loads of times, never won Canada.
Sergio Perez is coming on high performance soon,
Is he?
and I'm going to ask him.
Yeah. Did you move? Just ask him
Yeah.
one question. Did you move under braking?
Oh, well, you got to have Massa on as well. You got to have Felipe on. Otherwise, it's just ridiculous, isn't it?
Let's get them. We could. Should get them both on.
Yeah.
Good idea.
I'm going to ask him.
Yeah.
On Le Mans,
Yeah.
900.
Mr. Audi.
Yeah.
He was the steward, and he decided. Tom,
Yeah.
top guy, right decision.
Yeah. Won Le Mans loads of times, never won Canada.
Sergio Perez is coming on high performance soon,
Is he?
and I'm going to ask him.
Yeah. Did you move? Just ask him
Yeah.
one question. Did you move under braking?
Oh, well, you got to have Massa on as well. You got to have Felipe on. Otherwise, it's just ridiculous, isn't it?
Let's get them. Should get them both on.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Fighting there.
Yeah. Wrestling.
Just bringing it up to the current day before we wrap up this amazing conversation. Do you like the fact that Cadillac went with two older drivers, but
Yes.
two race-winning drivers?
Yes.
Yes.
Emphatically, yes.
And
Yes, yes.
ironically, both won about what, same amount of races?
Probably.
Yeah.
Just wonder whether they're loving it though. I was watching them in Miami, and I thought, if they both got children, has Valtteri got kids?
No.
No.
Sergio's got enough for both of them.
Sergio's got plenty. I just think, like, at the age you're both at, when you've won races and you've done what you've done, is it really thrilling still to fly around the world, loads of time away from your family and friends?
Yeah,
saw
but
it
it's
driving
different
around
for them
in
the
now.
back like
He had
that.
his kids in Miami with him.
Yeah,
Probably because it's close to Mexico.
It's different for them now, isn't it? It's a project that they can both, they both know that this is, unless there's some miracle, this is their last gig in Formula One. But they can play a part in helping this team move forward. So they both, I haven't talked extensively to Sergio about it. I've talked to Valtteri about it, and he feels, it's very much part of this is a project. I want to be part of it. I don't want to say like benevolence, because like Formula One drivers are not great at that, by the way. But at least like be part of something bigger, not just like, okay, what's the next step? What's the next step? How do I win races? How do I win world championships? This is like, you win in a different way.
Are they young enough to springboard into another team from Cadillac? Or is this it for them?
I think this has
Oh,
to
sorry.
be-
You should be asking these questions.
No, it's a good question. I wouldn't think of a question that good. So
Of course you would. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
this
I don't know, mate. I think is this probably for the pair of them is but
Sergio did
last
actually
one.
say, didn't he? This is my final big project. He's
Yeah.
publicly said that.
oh, he has?
Yeah.
He didn't mean it.
You don't think so?
I mean, something can happen,
Do you
right?
think he
There
still
can
has a
be.
desire to do well in Cadillac, show what he's worth, and get a move to a fast team? Yeah.
You reckon?
I think so.
You think so, or you know so?
I think so. You'll have to ask him.
Have you asked him?
Right.
You don't think so?
I mean, something can happen,
Do you
right?
think he
There
still
can
has a
be.
desire to do well in Cadillac, show what he's worth, and get a move to a fast team? Yeah.
You reckon?
I think so.
You think so, or you know so?
I think so. You'll have to ask him.
Have you asked him?
Right.
You have
I
asked.
think so.
You have asked him.
No,
But that's okay for him to still be ambitious.
I think he will be happy to make Cadillac great, for sure. But what if it takes a little bit longer than Sergio's got left in him and another team comes and says, hey, we want you to, then what do? You know what I mean?
Yeah. If I mean, look, he's like I just talked.
League that, bro. Oh my god. Like, what? It's ruining his chances of becoming the #1 driver if the team becomes somewhat competent. Say,
About Formula One drivers aren't great at benevolence. So if one of the top teams turned around for whatever reason and he'd have to be performing
Yeah.
and said, "Hey Sergio,
Or a mid-grade
come
team.
and help us," yeah, and he thinks that there's more in it for him, he'll do it. All drivers would. They're athletes. They only have a short shelf life, right?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they?
anyway.
Let's say you've got a choice between Ollie Behrman, who is looking excellent again this season and looks like a real talent, and Sergio, right? And you're one of the top teams and you're looking for someone for next year. Has Sergio not been damaged by what happened at Red Bull?
His last season there, a bit of damage, but at Cadillac, say you significantly beat Valtteri, who I think is an outstanding racing car driver, won races, sometimes in that Mercedes is good, if not better than Lewis at the time. Then the question is, would somebody look at him? And not versus an Ollie Behrman, but maybe versus somebody else.
I think what we should talk about is that it's a clever decision from Cadillac, right?
Definitely.
The
They
worst-
chose.
He's talking about fucking Haas, isn't he? Shit. Oh no. Okay. Okay. Could be. I see that. We didn't lose any shinies. This is the best we got. Fucking nothing. Lovely.
owns the right to, from my perspective.
Totally. You cannot have so you've got to have an experienced driver. It would be like outrageous to pick two rookies because the whole thing is
you're lost.
You just lost, right? But then you just pick one. There was a notion that, you know, perhaps Brian Herter or someone like that would go into the seat.
Yeah, Colton.
And then him
That
as
makes
well.
sense.
And then you pick, like, say, Valtteri or Checo. Then at that point, because both of them have been out of the car for a little bit, like, do you know whether they're performing or not? So I think having both of them there gives you a
It's the
really
right
good
thing.
benchmark. It's a
Yep.
really solid benchmark for the team. And then you can just say, we're all right. The drivers are good, right?
Yeah,
We know
yeah.
we've got two solid drivers. So we know where we are and we know where we need to work. So I think that was a demon move from Cadillac.
Right choice.
Is there
Agreed.
not a temptation as a team boss, though, for next season to go, look, we've had the experience, we've had the benchmarking, we know where we're at. Oh, there's this really exciting young driver, really driven, 21, 22, got that little bit of edge, doesn't bring any baggage. Maybe we don't need the Valtteri Sergio partnership next season as well.
So
Did
contracts.
you just recently watch the F1 movie or something?
Okay.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
last
this is a
night?
good combination.
on the tube here.
I just think that teams are always looking at the future, the future, the
Yeah,
future,
yeah,
the future.
yeah,
And
yeah,
they'll,
yeah.
someone at Cadillac will be like, is there a great young, driven American driver we can put in this car, please?
Colton Herta in
That's what they're doing, isn't it?
Yeah, at High Tech in F2,
in F2.
learning the circuit.
How is he getting on?
So I talked to Ollie Oaks, who said he's proper quick. So, but I
We
think he's
sort of
still
knew
learning.
that, though, that Colton Herta was proper quick. Like,
Yeah, but Ollie compares him to other proper quick F2 drivers that he's had, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
the basis of comparison is different. So for Ollie to say that, I believe him. And Ollie knows his onions. He was
Yeah.
karting world champion, I think.
Yeah, and he's
himself.
run
Yeah, High Tech.
Hundreds
whatever,
of-
yeah.
Good
drivers,
combination.
he knows it there.
I felt sorry for him what happened in F1. That was a good example of how brutal Formula One can be. What happened to Ollie Oaks, wasn't it? I think we're out of time, guys.
Oh,
But not before.
This isn't a joke. There's a true story. So
another one,
Yeah.
like the snails.
I've got
The great thing is when you've lived the life that you've lived, you don't actually need jokes. You just need to tell the true stories from your life. And they're as good as dad jokes.
so in our Cornwall place,
Here we go.
I've got
House
ma-
number
ma-
7.
man of the people. Man of
Next
the
week he'll
people.
tell us about his South
no
France
South
villa.
South. No, I have none of that. Rebecca, I mean, I shouldn't say I'm not a huge fan of Cornwall. I'm learning to enjoy it, but having grown up in
Such a difficult place to enjoy.
having grown up in America, it was rare for us to go to the beach when it was 55 degrees Fahrenheit and
Please, this is we're in London now.
yeah, and having to put up those wind breakers just so you don't get blown away on the beach.
Breakers.
I mean, geez. Anyway, so
What is 50? Can we just for our UK
55, that's like 10,
18.
10 degrees
Oh, is
C.
it?
Yeah,
10,
Okay.
10.
cold, chilly.
Anyway, chilly. So
beach
maybe
weather.
12. 10,
Beach
12.
weather,
Yeah,
yeah.
beach,
Beach
weather.
weather
for
in
you.
Cornwall beach
Middlesbrough.
weather.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be tropical, mate.
Anyway, so I wasn't quite used to cutting the grass there, and some of the stones chipped our sliding doors.
Oh, it's so annoying when the staff aren't available.
So I
man.
had to replace them because they're chipped.
Yeah.
And some
Critel.
Irish guy came and replaced them, and I couldn't believe
Cancelled.
his name,
Go on.
Paddy O'Doors.
It wasn't. It was not.
What an aptronym.
No.
No,
Yes.
it wasn't.
Paddy
Fucking
O'Doors.
out and out lie.
I'm still not sure whether it's a true story or not.
Yeah. Can you believe aptronym? Paddy O'Doors.
I'm only ill during the week.
Why?
I think I've got a weakened immune system.
All yours take like 30 milliseconds to register.
Well, those are the best dad jokes, right?
I only know 25 letters of the alphabet. I don't know why.
But you know, now that you mention that,
Yeah.
on my way down here, got off the tube.
The tube.
Yeah. And I was about 6 dwarfs.
No way.
Not happy.
So mine, yeah, I mean, so mine might
Let me
be a
guess.
little bit.
I was in a car.
No,
Yeah.
no more Catholic.
Let's a sweary religious joke from Rob for a change.
Yeah, no, more
it go.
engineering stuff now. When it's really based on my obsession with Formula One engineering. So I used to be very obsessed, in fact, with you know the brake bias in the car. But I'm finding I've got a bit more balance now.
That's a really engineering joke, isn't it? Oh, Rob, I've got a joke before we start the Grand Prix weekend.
And then I was asked to go and do a talk the other night on tyre degradation, but I found that the source material wore out.
Oh, I like that.
See what was logging these?
like that.
He's got his phone
He's
out.
timing this because he came up.
He's got his Apple Notes.
No. I got to tell my kids that one.
I love that. I just swallowed a load of Scrabble tiles. Next time I go to the toilet, could spell a disaster. Yeah.
Let's finish on a high.
Right.
You can't wait to leave.
Right.
You told us you had a phone call to make. I think that's what you're worrying about now. aren't you?
Exactly. And that phone call was supposed to be at 6, and it's 6:15.
Oh, okay, right.
I got to call Goldman Sachs. Oh, no, that was you.
Whoa.
Definitely keep that in.
I'm the man of the people. Yeah.
Rob's busy pretending he's not a millionaire. Don't forget that. Guys, thank you very much. Another fascinating episode. Please tell your friends about the content. Tell your friends about the show. Hit subscribe. Hit follow. Otherwise, these do get angry, right?
Yeah, angry.
Very cross.
Angry.
Do the follow thing.
Yeah, do the follow. There you go. That's the technical term. Do the follow thing. And can you say we love how many of
more
you.
things in my Instagram.
And I was racing for Williams, but I was sitting on the side of the McLaren lawyers from Dennis, whilst the lawyers of the Contract Recognition Board looked at the paperwork that Williams had, looked at the paperwork, and decided that actually McLaren's contract was valid and that I would drive for them in 96, 97. And then I went to the airport and flew with Frank, who was in the meeting, to the next Grand Prix. The whole thing was you're totally
can't make it up.
Yeah, absolutely, totally unnecessary.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's F1 Beyond the Grid. And I'm delighted to say we are joined by 13-time Grand Prix winner David Coulthard. DC, how are
13.
you?
I'm good, thanks. I think I'm probably in slightly better shape than you because I've not just run a marathon. So have you got blisters, and cramps, and all sorts of
All of
side
the
effects?
above. Difficult to walk, I have to say. But I've got the bug, actually. Marathon running is where it's at. And I think I can say the same for Sebastian.
Yeah, very impressive what he did. And should you be surprised though, because he's still a young man. He's got all of the sort of competitive genes that understands focus, discipline, preparation, and then of course execution. So maybe this has become his next bug. You know, he's going to be aiming for what would be an impressive amateur time. Because he did under 3 hours.
He did under 3. There's a stack of people, I think, that get to about 2:30.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but he'll now be thinking I can do 2:30. And do you know what? We're not here to talk about marathon, but his ability to absorb information. He treated it like a Grand Prix, actually, the marathon, in terms of his preparation. And I learned a lot from him about preparation, really.
Yeah.
But DC, funny enough, we're talking about a racing driver in him because you are someone who has lived and worked in Formula One for more than 30 years. Very few people know this paddock better than you. And I wanted to discuss how drivers get themselves into the right place at the right time. You know, when you look at a Max Verstappen, it looks easy, but there are a lot of very talented drivers who never get there. How difficult is it?
It's incredibly difficult. There's no question that the racing gods or a bit of racing luck is needed. You're being in the right place at the right time, available with the right preparation. But should we be surprised that people who are prepped, people that are training for that moment, are therefore able to deliver when the opportunity comes along? And I think that's the key thing. If we look at the current grid, if we go back to when Carlos Sainz was at Ferrari, he has appendicitis, gets pulled out of the car, and suddenly with no prior understanding that he was about to make his Grand Prix debut, you have Oliver Bearman jump in the car and go out and deliver. And then suddenly that cements very strongly the foundations of what I'm sure will be a long career. All the rumours are that he will be at Ferrari in the future. The thing that stands in the way of him is, well, if Lewis has a great year, then he'll probably want to go again for another year. And then, unless Charles decides to go somewhere else, which is possible but seems unlikely, then he's maybe patient, as we saw with George Russell. Probably stayed a bit longer at Williams than he would have liked, but there was no room at the inn within Mercedes. So timing is definitely a big part, and making sure that either yourself, and I always believe that it's important to put yourself forward. You can have a manager, but at the end of the day, signing you. So have the confidence to put yourself in front of the various decision makers.
How important was a manager? Because famously, Gerhard Berger says, I didn't want a manager because I wanted to keep all of the money for myself. You did variously, IMG, huge agency behind you. Then you worked with Martin Brundle. What did a manager do for you that you couldn't have done yourself?
So I got introduced to IMG, which were, I should say, a big management agency of that era. They were working with Senna, Prost, Schumacher on some of his business. And it was through Paul Stewart Racing, Jackie Stewart's son's team, that they had a relationship with IMG for many years. Jackie had been managed by Mark McCormick, who's no longer with us. So it, I guess, was part of them speculatively having some young drivers, which was, I guess, at the beginning of that curve. There's lots of management companies out there now that are managing kids in karting, offering them the dream. As long as you pay us some money, we will offer you the dream of future stardom. And it's a trading business that they're hoping that one of them comes through and proves to be successful. But I started into Formula One with IMG, which I don't really feel that they put me in a place to become a Grand Prix driver, because I'd been testing for Williams anyway. I tested in 90, 91, 92, 93. And in the beginning, I wasn't paid to test. I was just called up to go and do things like that. So it was, let's say, a pretty low-level relationship. And then it became more formal. And then what happened in Imola happened. And even then, you couldn't lobby Williams to come. And I actually remember saying to my manager, Tim Wright, at the time, after we don't speak, we don't call Frank or Patrick, the team don't make it. We're not going to be those people that are going, well, what is the driver? We have a driver for you. And I felt very strongly that wasn't the thing to do. And I know that a number of drivers, of course, did reach out to the team, or managers had reached out to the team going, hey, you need a driver. And I think I think the approach was the right way. So eventually the team, once the emotion was understood and they got on with the business of going Grand Prix racing, they decided to put me in the car for a single race. It was that was it. I had to prove in that single race that I could be a servant to the team. And then that led to me sharing the car with Nigel Mansell over the course of, I did 8 Grand Prix in 94, which then led to the full-time drive. And what I believe took me to being a full-time Grand Prix driver from 95 onwards was my commitment. I was there at the factory. I was with the team. I was living close by. And I think Nigel, as an experienced former Grand Prix champion. He was sort of flying in from America. He'd come and do the race. He'd buzz out again. You know, he was in that routine of, well, you know what I can do, so I'm not going to stay around and sort of, you know, spend time with the team. But I think that's exactly what Williams needed at that time, you know, through the emotion and the difficulty of 94, which was traumatic. You know, Roland Ratzenberger, of course, and then with Ayrton. I think the team needed a reset of sort of family commitment.
It seemed that you owned that relationship with Williams. So what was IMG doing for you then at the time?
Well, sorry to sort of hesitate. Difficult, of course, always to see what people are doing. Andrew Hampel was one of the senior people. Ian Todd, who went on to work with Nike. Tim Wright was my designated manager. He was keeping Formula One teams across my results in Formula 3000. I remember Patrick Head saying to him, look, can you stop sending letters? Which is what people did back then. Nowadays, it would be an email. But so they were, I guess, lobbying the name and doing that kind of managerial side, but very difficult to sell or to find sponsorship for a young driver. So they weren't really doing that. They were, I guess, I remember Tim saying to Ron Dennis, you know, it'd be really nice if you gave David a watch. And I remember Ron going, well, why would I want to give David a watch? I was a Formula 3000 driver. And he's going, well, because then he'll really feel connected to you. And he's going, I run McLaren. He'll feel connected to me whether I do that or not. So there was probably some missteps in that process. But what was a sort of low point in that relationship, through the relations they had with Ayrton and Alain, they had a showy contract, both the drivers at that time, and they'd managed to leverage a helmet for me when I was in Formula 3. And they brought that helmet to Brands Hatch when I was testing, and they took it out of the cover. And my helmet, as you will well remember, is a white cross on a blue helmet, blue background. It's the Scottish flag. It's called the Saltire. They took the helmet out. It was a blue cross on a white background. And I think that might be the Finnish flag or something, but they just...
You see, that's really bad.
They just didn't get the importance of the crash helmet.
Yeah.
You know, helmets, as you know, are the most personal thing that the race driver has, and it's something that we really connect with. So when I ended up racing for Williams in 95, through into 96, I actually then wrote to Mark McCormack, had a multi-year contract, asking to come out of the contract, because I just felt that I wanted something more racing-centric. I wanted something more personal to Formula One. I don't doubt that IMG, like all of these other big companies, would be commercially very good, because that's the space they live in. But the money was never the motivation for me. It was, what is the best car that I can be in? What is the best environment I can be in?
This episode is sponsored by Shopify. One thing I've always admired about people who start their own businesses is that at some point they simply decide to give it a go. Of course, that comes with a few doubts as well. Whether it's launching a business or beginning a new project, there's always that moment where you think, what if this doesn't work? But sometimes all you really need are the right tools to help you get started. And that's where Shopify can help. Shopify gives you everything you need to get going in one place, from building your online store with ready-made templates to Shopify's built-in AI tools that help you write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your images. And it can help with your marketing too, thanks to email and social media tools designed to get the word out about your brand and help you find your customers. It's basically like having your own commerce expert at your fingertips, with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and beyond. It's time to turn those what-ifs into with Shopify today. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and that's process program. So it's no
Fine. You're in a Williams. You've just won your first Grand Prix at the Portuguese Grand Prix. And McLaren were having a torrid time, right? They just switched to Mercedes engines, and 95 was a real low point for them. So if you're trying to get yourself in the best car, why walk away from the best car?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good question. But we have to take a step back to 94. So numbers-wise, 1994, I did 8 races. So I was a test driver. I had a test driver contract for Williams, and I was being paid £30,000. A reasonable amount of money in 1994. Certainly, probably better than people with a higher education were probably earning at that time. And then I did the 8 races where I was paid £5,000 a race, right? And so at the end of that year, I had been paid £70,000 to be a Grand Prix driver.
What was Mansell getting per race? Just out of
million per race. And which
did you know that at the time?
Of course, I heard the rumours and what have you. But anyway, again, I was never once was I complaining about money. But I did have a conversation with Frank at the Canadian Grand Prix in 1994, which is where I scored my first points, because the withholding tax agreement with Canada was a flat rate of 10,000 Canadian dollars for every driver. So whether you were Nigel or Ayrton or Schumacher or a young guy like me doing my second Grand Prix, you were obliged to pay 10,000 Canadian dollars as a withholding tax. Well, I was only earning £5,000, which was less than 10,000 Canadian dollars. So I went to Frank and said, Mr. Williams, could you please help me with the tax? Because otherwise I'm paying to be here at the Grand Prix. And he thought about it and went, no. So I effectively paid to score my first points, which is not unusual to have paying drivers in Formula One. You just don't associate that with Williams. So it's fair to say it was a little bit hand to mouth. I was still living, sharing a house, a rented house in Milton Keynes with some mechanics.
And please tell me that Frank was paying your expenses.
Yes, the flight and the hotel was paid. Yeah, absolutely. So by the end of that first year, and bear in mind, I had an overdraft debt of £320,000, which had been run up to race in Formula 3000. So at the end of that year, that 70,000, 10% of that would be going to the management. Some of it would be going to my, let's say, life expenses, and a little bit would be going to drawing down that £320,000 that I owed, which was secured against the family transport business. So we get to the end of the year, 94. We've agreed, so my management have agreed, a 2-year contract, 95, 96, to drive for Williams. We go at the end of 1994, December, to sign that contract. And as the lawyer's getting the paperwork out, so you see I was signing into the end of 96. Frank goes, I've changed my mind. I want to do a 1-year contract. So the lawyers go, oh, okay, so we've got to scribble out 90, 96. I take some time out with my manager to go into another office, and we call Ron Dennis, because Ron had approached us in 94 already to look at whether we were available to join McLaren. And we said, well, we're not, we're going to re-sign with Williams. So we phone Ron, and Ron says, come to the factory, I'll sign a contract with you for 96.
Now.
Right, now. So we sign for 95 to drive for Williams. We go to Woking. We sign a contract for 96, 97 at McLaren, and I then drive up to Scotland to spend Christmas with my mum and dad. And I remember telling my parents, I'm going to be a Formula One driver for the next 3 years. And they were, oh, that's lovely. And I said, it'll be 1 year with Williams and 2 years with McLaren. And of course, they were like, how does that work? Well, it works because people change their mind. And then halfway through 95, Frank decides that he wants me for 96. And we're like, we're not available. And then he tries to use the Contract Recognition Board to enforce the test driver contract, which was a multi-year contract that ran through until I think 98. And so this hopefully is not too confusing for the listener, but we had to go to the lawyer's office in Geneva, which is where all of the Formula One drivers' contracts are lodged at the Contract Recognition Board. And I was racing for Williams, but I was sitting on the side of the McLaren lawyers and Martin Whitmarsh, who worked with Ron Dennis, whilst the lawyers of the Contract Recognition Board looked at the paperwork that Williams had, looked at the paperwork that McLaren had, and decided that actually McLaren's contract was valid and that I would drive for them in 96, 97. I then went to the airport and flew with Frank, who was in the meeting, to the next Grand Prix. The whole thing was totally...
Can't make it up.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally unnecessary if Frank had signed ultimately the contract that we'd agreed at the end of 94. So I finished that year with Williams, and then the 1995 Adelaide, I'd been leading the Grand Prix, crashed out, as you recall. That cost £500,000 win bonus at Williams, and it cost me $2 million over my McLaren 96, 97. So it was an expensive crash. And I went to dinner that night with Ron Dennis and his ex-wife, and I'm sitting there on my own going, okay, right, so I'm now a McLaren driver. So that's how that came about.
You didn't walk away from the fastest car. You'd committed to McLaren before.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I was committed to staying with the fastest car, but Frank changed his mind and then changed his mind again.
Was it an emotional decision to ring McLaren that day that Frank sort of reneged on the original deal?
Yeah, I was understandably disappointed that I'm there ready to sign a proper contract for 2 years with a team that I've been racing for, and they changed their mind. And I think the reason they changed their mind was because Damon Hill his lawyer was really pushing on trying to get Damon a big contract, and Frank probably just got to the point where he was going, well, drivers are pissing me off, so I'll put them both in a 1-year contract. But the risk to him was he would lose me, and he did. The risk to me was I went to a less competitive McLaren for 96. I think did Damon win 96 and Jack won 97, but then 98 McLaren came good. So
was
it took time.
that hard for you? Did you look over your shoulder a bit and go,
I went from
that
leading,
could have been me, mate?
Yeah, I went from leading the last race of 95 in Adelaide, and then 4 months later I'm sitting, I think, 14th on the grid in Melbourne. And at that point the penny dropped, just what the difference in performance was. And so I do recall, not that I made the move for money, I made the move for security of contract, but I do remember at that point thinking, I will never make a move ever again based on, let's say, security or financial. It will always be only about performance. And you can never know 1 year to the next, of course, but you get trends of performance. So when you have big regulation change like we just had, it shakes everything up. But when you have year to year of stability, you do tend to see the same teams towards the front.
Right. What is a driver prepared to put up with in order to get in the best car?
Well, Ayrton Senna famously told when he was at McLaren, and Alain Prost was there in 93, he famously went in the media and said, I will drive for Williams for nothing. I'll drive for free. Yeah. Because, of course, that suddenly makes people go, oh, well, if we're not paying the driver X amount of million, that's money that we can invest in the team. So the engineers will like that. The team owner will like that. So I think someone who's really committed will do whatever it takes to get in the best car. Right. That's what I truly believe. And I spent 9 years with McLaren, and at various times they had the best car, and at various times it wasn't. The move to Red Bull was about unfinished business. I knew it wasn't the best car, but I truly believed I could play a part in helping develop and structure that team towards being a winning team in the future, which turned out to be the case.
Yeah.
The team did go on to be very successful, and that comes from an absolute belief that Formula One is always about people. It's always about people. If you've got the right group of people working together, it's not always about who's the biggest talent or who's got the biggest brain or the best degree. You've got to have people that've got a willingness to work together and to have each other's back. So for me, the most successful teams are a little bit like SAS or any form of special forces. No human gets left behind. They defend each other. And when you see teams break down, it's because you get little factions of, well, it's their fault, and that's when you no longer have a team.
Having been in the sort of straitjacket of McLaren for 9 years, did you enjoy the player manager role? And was it liberating to go to Red Bull?
It was, in many ways, the right environment at the right time in my life. I was into my 30s. I had Formula One experience and knowledge. I had life experience. And I think that's the key thing that we don't always take into account when we're talking about drivers. Kimi Antonelli right now is leading the World Championship. Brilliantly fast, young talent. He's still a boy. You cannot make a man out of someone that hasn't had life man experiences. And you'll know as a parent and anyone else who's gone into the 30s, it doesn't make you quicker, but you're just more worldly. You're more capable of making decisions, of going, no, that doesn't work for me. That's how I'm going to get the best out of myself, and having the confidence in the environment that you're working. So that's why I think you don't judge somebody on a couple of race wins. You judge somebody on, can they handle the pace of a Grand Prix season? Can they do it back to back? We've seen brilliant drivers, people like Heinz-Harald Frentzen, who could win in a Jordan. He won one race in a Williams, which was a race-winning, championship-winning car. But somehow when the pressure of expectation comes, some drivers don't deliver. And when they're in, let's say, away from that spotlight, they extract performance from a car that you go, wow, that's impressive.
I always thought of Giancarlo Fisichella as
Yeah.
another driver.
Fizzy, Montoya, brilliantly
Yeah,
fast,
yeah.
doesn't give attitude, but came to McLaren, replacing me, spent a year, and then he was on his way again because it just didn't work out. So, drivers like that have got so much potential, but somehow don't manage, Daniel Ricciardo, brilliantly fast racing driver. But I think as he's now recognised, and he's done an interview this year talking about, he started to feel he was losing his way towards the end of his career, not because he was old, but he got distracted. He got distracted by what the world was offering him, where the key focus always has to be stopwatch, checker flag. They're your two North Stars in Formula One.
How difficult is it to maintain that focus as you get richer, as you get more famous?
Absolutely. It is difficult because you get used to people going, yes. And I remember I went from test driver at Williams being told what to do to being a Grand Prix driver, and the same people saying, David, would you mind? Could you please? And you start to go, hold on, I can say no. And you go, no, I don't want to do that. And they go, okay, no problem. Whereas when you're the test driver, you say no, they'll go, well, we'll get someone else to do it. Do you want to be the test driver? I never said no, is the point. But if I take that attitude of discovering what works for me within the Grand Prix paddock, when I had the confidence to go, that timing doesn't work. Can we move it? Because this will enable me to be better prepared. But yeah, for sure, you end up becoming a bit spoiled. And around 30 years old, I was in Formula One for several years. I was earning millions. I had the plane crash on an aircraft that I didn't need to be on. The aircraft that I was normally using was booked, let's say, for 2:00. I woke up early in London. I wanted to go back to Monaco. I got on the phone to my office, said, let's bring the plane earlier. And they were like, well, your aircraft isn't available. I said, find me another one. It's ridiculous. They find me another one. I turn up, say hi to the pilots. An hour later, the plane crashes, they're dead. And I'm going, okay. So maybe being a little bit more patient, a little bit more humble, a little bit less, me, could be a lifesaver. And, that marked my moment of growing up. And then the next few years were my strongest years in Formula One.
I always thought you were very good at using the media. We had some great pre-season lunches at the Bluebird restaurant in London, didn't we?
Yes.
But perception is 9/10 of the law in this paddock, isn't it? If enough people say something, whether it's true or not, people will start to believe it. How did you use the media as a driver?
Well, I wanted to build personal relationships because my belief is that gives you the benefit of the doubt more often. So I didn't have the attitude of I don't want to talk to anyone and the media are the enemy. For me, it was we all work and live within this world, this ecosystem of Formula One. I've got one of the best seats in the house as a driver. How do I do everything in my power to make sure that I'm getting the best car, best opportunity, fulfilling my talent? And when things are not going so well, which will happen, how am I going to have the benefit of the doubt rather than immediately being blamed or it's the driver's fault? How do you build relationships with the people that are influential, and the media are influential? They are the voices of the sport that carry the news around the world. So yeah, I always placed importance on that.
And what have you learned about the media now that you're working in it that you wish you'd known when you were racing?
I wish I just had the wider knowledge and experience of how the words can craft opinion, and how some members of the media will use you to stimulate a story. So it could be going to Michael, going, David said that your driving's totally unacceptable, because he's going to go, well, I don't give a about him. He's just another guy that makes up the numbers. so they can create attention, which is part of the remit to get a reaction. If everything's all smashy and nicey, then you're not really going to get the human element of reaction. And some drivers are very, Jack and Juan Pablo Montoya were always very much what you see is what you get. They had no problem to just blah, blah, blah. Where I was maybe a little bit more considered in my answers, a bit more diplomatic on occasion.
But would you drop a bomb with a friendly journalist if you're trying to put pressure on on Ron Dennis to give you a few more quid or just change something in your contract for the following year? Might you go up to a journalist and say, "Yeah, I had a really interesting chat with Ferrari"?
Sure, absolutely.
Did you do a bit of that, even if you hadn't?
I'm not a liar, Tom. I'm not a liar. But sharing information with key people is part of the game, and you're telling something to a trusted journalist in confidence, but you absolutely know that off the record has a boundary, which you don't want that to be broken, but you know that you can then have something that's going to be little rumors build. So yeah, it's part of the business of Formula One. Getting yourself in the seat is difficult enough. Staying there when everyone wants your seat, if you're not having good performance, it's the other driver manager's job to get in there and speak to the journalist going, well, David's not doing a good job. You'd be much better putting Damon in the car or whatever it happens to be. So that's part of the game. That's everyone looks so sort of friendly and all the drivers get along, but behind the scenes, they want each other's seat. They want to do whatever's necessary to get the best car.
Yeah, on that note, I think the paddock is more friendly now than it was in your day. Would you agree with that? I'm talking about
100%.
between the drivers.
Between the drivers.
There was animosity between some of you guys.
100%. Yeah, it's a lot friendlier, Formula One. And the paddock is a lot friendlier. And I think Red Bull brought that more openness when they started with the energy station and they started doing chilled Thursday nights where other team members could come to Red Bull's hospitality to have a coffee or have a drink at the end of work. And you could see it was, people like Ron Dennis were like, well, hold on, I don't want our guys going in there. It was very territorial.
That's a good word, actually.
Famously, I've only ever been in Ferrari's motorhome twice in 30 years. Once,
Even now?
Yeah. I went in once to have a meeting with Jean Todt, and once because I was flying back to Switzerland with Michael. And after the race, he'd fallen asleep in his driver room and everyone's packing up. And I'm like, and so I said to them, well, you go in. So I was going in and said, Michael, we have to go. You need to wake up. So, because, I never, just didn't go into rival teams' hospitalities. And even, working as I do in television, I'll go into McLaren for a briefing, or I'll go into Red Bull because I still do show runs for them. But I never really go into other team hospitalities if I don't have a reason to go there to meet someone, because they've got their partners, their sponsors, whatever it is that they're doing that's important. They don't need me going in and getting in the way.
How did the meeting with Jean Todt go, by the way?
I ended up having a further meeting with him in Paris at his apartment near the Champs-Élysées to talk about a contract for them. And it was interesting because it was the same time when I was coming out of my IMG contract, and I'd asked Bernie Ecclestone to help me speak to the owner of IMG, whose name I've just forgotten right now.
Mark McCormack.
Mark McCormack. because when on the level that I was talking to try and come out of my contract, they were saying, no, we have a contract, that's it. And I understood that I would have to pay something to leave the contract, but they just weren't entertaining the idea. So I went to meet with Bernie, asked him if he could speak to Mark McCormack on my behalf. And that coincided with the time I'd just come back from a meeting with Jean Todt in Paris. And Bernie said, so are you thinking about going to Ferrari? And I went, well, you know, every driver would love to be with Ferrari at some point, but I think I'm happy at McLaren. I then left that meeting, went to have a meeting with my lawyers, and I get a call from Ron going, what's this? You want to leave and go to Ferrari? Bernie had spoken to him and, you know, Jean Todt. They were manipulating the environment. And I was like, I know, I don't want to go to Ferrari. I want to stay with McLaren. So, but it showed you that at that level, these guys all knew what was going on, and they were just, you know, drivers are like the pawns they move around.
This episode is sponsored by Lisa. I've talked a lot on this show about all the opportunities that come from traveling through the Formula One season, but I have to be honest, nothing quite compares to getting home and sleeping in my own bed again. Which is why I'm delighted to be partnering with Lisa for this episode, because at home we've had our current mattress for far too long and we've finally decided it's time to replace it. But to be honest, I didn't really know where to start. I just know that if a mattress is too firm or too soft, my back definitely lets me know about it. But Lisa's online sleep quiz was genuinely really helpful. It asks about things like sleep position, firmness, whether you sleep hot, and the sort of support that you need. And it pointed me towards the Sapira Hybrid. Medium firm, breathable, and designed with a combination of supportive springs and memory foam. It sounds perfect, and I can't wait to try it. Lisa mattresses are designed and assembled in the USA, and they've even been awarded Best Hybrid and Best Memory Foam mattresses by New York Times Wirecutter. Plus, they make the whole process really straightforward with free shipping, easy returns, and a 120-night sleep trial. So go to lisa.com for 30% off selected mattresses, plus get an extra $50 off with the promo code GRID, exclusive for our listeners. So that's Lisa, LEESA.com, promo code GRID for 30% off selected mattresses, plus an extra $50 off. And support our show and let them know we sent you after checkout. Lisa.com, promo code GRID.
Can we talk about the lure of Ferrari then? I mean, is it true that every driver would like to race for Ferrari?
Mattresses, plus an extra $50 off. And support our show and let them know we sent you after checkout. Lisa.com, promo code GRID.
Can we talk about the lure of Ferrari then? I mean, is it true that every driver would like to race for Ferrari? At least contemplate the idea.
I never had this big passion for Ferrari growing up. You know, the British teams, as a young guy watching Formula One on television, I was drawn to the British teams. Even when Nigel went to Ferrari and had, you know, and he was revered, he won his first Grand Prix for Ferrari. It was, you know, it was an amazing story. But I think having raced a little bit in Europe in karting and the lower formulas, there was a comfort for me in British teams, and in British teams we know are international. You have every nationality working within them, but I think I felt a security of knowing what I was dealing with, that I would have been uncomfortable doing that at Ferrari. And I think for Lewis, it must be challenging. He spent all his life with British racing teams, and he's there within Ferrari, picking up the language, but not fluent in the language. You know, Charles is embedded, he's been there for some time. And it's just, the teams are so big now, no matter how much Lewis will tell us he's been at the factory and he's been on the simulator, to affect change and influence change in an organization that large, I think just takes a long, long time. And I'm not sure he'll have the time to really make it the way he was able to, you know, be. I think Mercedes were shaped around his needs, and it was tremendously successful.
It's like they're like big oil tankers, these teams, aren't they?
Absolutely,
It takes a while.
There really nothing is going on.
See, when I think of the lure of Ferrari, I just always come back to Jean Alesi, who turned down the 1991 Williams,
Yes.
which went on to dominate.
Yeah.
I think he'd even signed a contract with Frank, actually.
I
hadn't he?
believe so, because I think Eddie Jordan was involved at that time.
Yeah.
So part of that deal, Frank got a Ferrari Formula One car out of releasing Jean to go to Ferrari. So I don't know which Formula One car that was in the Williams collection, but that was Frank's payoff for having had a contract with Jean and Jean wanting to join Ferrari, that the Williams organization got a Ferrari, an old F1 car, for their collection. So yeah, look, I get it with Jean, and Jean he's a great friend. His passion for motor racing is still very much there. He's the president of Paul Ricard Racetrack, so I'll be with him next weekend for the Paul Ricard Classic. He was racing in the Monaco
What's
Classic.
up?
I saw he had a little shunt in one of the Ferraris. Thankfully, he wasn't injured, but a little bit of damage to these incredibly expensive classic cars. But yeah, passion took him there. And as we know, the history books, he only had one victory in Montreal. But I'm delighted he did get a victory. But I think in terms of raw talent, he was one of the fastest guys out there.
Yeah. Engineering now. How much can a quick driver mask the deficiencies in a car?
I think the exceptionals. So they're all good in Formula One. And if the most arrogant statement you'll get out of me is to say I was a good Formula One driver. But sport is about exceptional. And the exceptionals are the names that we can all mention. You know, the Schumachers, the Hamiltons, the Verstappens, the Sennas, and anyone who's won multiple world championships. They're exceptional. You can win a world championship through being in the right place at the right time. And not to take anything away from Keke Rosberg, but he famously won a world championship winning one Grand Prix. You know, that's not historically what you associate with the greats of the sport, who get the scruff of the neck of the car and go on and win multiple Grand Prix. So how would you put a number on that? I guess you would have to average their performance relative to their teammates over the time they were in Formula One. People like Senna could be half a second or more, you know, famously a second quicker than Prost once in Monaco in a qualifying lap, but such was the advantage they had. I think Alain was still second on the grid. Actually, we spoke about this off air, I think last year, when Formula One was so close, the grid was covered by a second. There was one of the years, I think it was 99, Mika was on pole in Barcelona. I was second and I was 7/10 slower. And Michael was third, and he was 7/10 slower than me. So the top three were covered by 1.4 seconds. The whole grid was like 4 seconds. We'd just come out of an era where the entire grid was covered by a second. So, you know, this sport has evolved. But I think in terms of the greats, they've got to have a couple of tenths in their pocket. And I think it's, if you actually break a couple of tenths down to a 5.5 kilometer racetrack with 19 or 20 corners, the corners obviously is where they influence that. It's tiny, tiny amounts of time. We're talking thousands of a second in every single corner that makes them exceptional. So we're not talking that they're just stronger and they can bench press an extra 20 kilos. The mind controls the body. Their mind is able to process the feeling of grip visually as they approach the corner, and then physically when they're in the corner, when the car's at the limit of adhesion, they just do it better. And it's tiny margins that makes exceptionals.
You talk about processing, right? Would you agree that all the greats are bright, have a strong intellect?
I think it's a different kind of brightness, because you could look at a Nigel Mansell and his communication style with the team when things weren't going well was quite blunt instrument. It was quite, you know, very often you'd see him ranting at his engineer on the pit wall and storming off, throwing his gloves into the crowd. You know, it was
Emotional.
not. Yeah, it was an emotional.
An emotional unintelligence, actually.
But you've got to have bravery. You've got to have commitment. You've got to have belief. You've got to have the intelligence to understand how to work the political system in the garage, because you're constantly lobbying the new development. You want it on your car. The team may rationalize putting it on the other car because they're ahead of you in the championship, or the risk is it doesn't work and you are being supported. But you've got to know which battles to fight. And the battles you're fighting as a young driver is against people like Frank Williams or Ron Dennis, people who've been around a long time and they've negotiated with some very successful drivers. But you learn. You know, if you really want to be the best you can within your environment, you figure out what are the things, like I figured out the way to soften Ron was to have any conversation starting talking about family, talking about his family. If I could get his family in his mind, who he famously kept away from the Formula One paddock, you could see him disarm. And then I would get into the conversation of what I needed, what I wanted, I was there to try and get something out of the conversation. Adrian knew the way to get Adrian to work at Red Bull was through his ex-wife. He and I'm sure his wife today is very influential because Adrian is very, very much a focus engineer on his creative skills, and a lot of other things probably not so important to him. So you learn how to get the best out of people. That's part of the role. How do I soften someone to get what I want? How do I move someone to one side because they're getting in the way of what I need in my performance? So it's a political game as well as being a racing driver game.
You could do that brilliantly. Do you think the Verstappens, the Hamiltons, the Leclercs are doing it as well?
I have to believe they're doing it because they're all at an incredibly high level. I think that Lewis has his emotional intelligence. He's clearly an incredibly talented race driver, but he's a softer personality than a Nigel Mansell in his approach. We all famously remember Ayrton with absolute commitment doing interviews where he is, the fact that there's a room of people around when he's connecting with the person that he's making the point to, he's on you and you would feel that.
Drilled in.
Because that was commitment. So they all have their different way of positioning themselves within a team. But I'm not going to say that any of them are going to suddenly, re-engage with university and come out with a degree. But I think that there's a social intelligence, a human intelligence, and obviously an ability to feel the edge of adhesion.
And that processing. Just go back to the marathon. I was stunned with how much information Vettel could absorb and remember, just talking about his training program.
I really go there.
Anything that will give us performance. Things that will not give us performance, no interest. But anything that is going to give a technical edge or a small edge, that's there, ready to be pulled.
I know we're here to talk about drivers, but just in the last half hour or so, it's really struck me. Why are you not running a Formula One team? And I'm actually asking you a serious question there, because you get the sport, you get the politics, you get how to get the best out of people.
Well, maybe I will one day. But right now I'm doing what I'm doing. Yeah.
Would that interest you?
Yeah, of course. course. I love the sport, and but right now my skills are deployed in the areas that I've chosen over the last few years. You know, beyond what I do within the paddock with television. Then I'm a shareholder in Whisper, which is one of the fastest growing production businesses over the last 15 years. You know, I'm involved with Velocity Experience, where we were doing the McLaren event down in downtown Miami this weekend. We were doing some work with San Pellegrino at another place. We work with VistaJets. You know, we are across a number of the partners, and
You're too busy to run a Formula One team, DC.
well, I'm busy with all of those things as well. So you cannot be, to use a Jackie Stewart expression, you cannot be a little bit pregnant. You've either got to be fully committed, or, as I am with my partners in my other businesses, I fulfill the role that I can to help enhance those businesses, and they get on with their skill set, the leadership skills that they have to run the businesses.
Look, I know you've got to go. I've got two more questions, if I may. One is, okay, looking at the 26 grid, the silly season, driver silly season is going to kick off. It gets earlier and earlier, doesn't it? Who is the most sought after driver in Formula One? Who is the first domino to fall, and then everything else slips into place afterwards? Who are we waiting for?
Well, I think Ferrari, we're waiting on Lewis, obviously, to decide if his year continues as it started. Then I suspect that he'll naturally want to keep going, because he's done a great job in the first few Grand Prix. Time stands still for nobody, but as we're seeing with Fernando at 44, 45, just become a dad, then he's not being at all outperformed by Lance within that team. So the longevity that drivers have nowadays, I think, is absolutely clear. It's about motivation and energy rather than whether they've got the speed and the talent. So I think Lewis is a key domino to fall, and that will, I believe, directly influence what happens for Ollie Behrman. Then if that happens, then that frees up an opportunity within Haas, and then maybe there's a Formula 2 driver that's got the opportunity to come in. I think the other existing drivers, you know, it's in Max's hands whether he stays or goes, whether he takes a year out or not. Any of those things are a possibility, but we will find out when they make that decision. And I think that the other sort of key teams, you know, Williams hasn't started out the way they wanted. Therefore, I've got to imagine that a Carlos and an Alex are looking at what are the other options. You know, they've gone from kind of there to there. So they've got to be considered too. One is a Grand Prix winner. The other one has shown his speed and performance over the last few years. So all of them will be looking for where are the next steps. You know, what is the possibility? Is somebody going to be dropping out of Formula One, or are you going to be able to negotiate your way into that team?
Right. And the last question then, you talked about performance trends earlier. Put your racing driver head on. Which team
What do you
in the next 3 years?
Okay.
Well, it would seem obvious to say that what we're seeing perform right now, we're into this new set of regulations. Mercedes are up and running. So there's a absolute safe.
Safe for the next 3 years?
Yeah, I believe so. But your big four are quite clearly where the safe places are. So Mercedes, McLaren, Ferrari, Red Bull have slipped obviously to be at the bottom of that pecking order right now, but they could very quickly move forward again because their power unit seems to be performing. So it's about unlocking the chassis performance. And then it's a mix of teams in that next grid, isn't it? You know, your Haas's, your Audis, Williams have obviously got potential because where they are right now, I don't think is reflecting the DNA of that team. Cadillac is a long-term play, you know, coming as a complete startup. So yeah, I don't think I've probably said anything that you wouldn't have put your finger on. But right now, George and Kimi are in the World Championship pound seat. The World Championship is going to one of those two drivers if the continued trend of performance in the first three Grand Prix plays out. McLaren showed well, so they may get in the mix. I don't see Mercedes winning everything. And of course, Ferrari, we know that Charles is one of the fastest drivers on the grid, and Lewis seems to be, you know, born again. He's got an energy and right there knocking on the door. So there's a lot to be excited about.
DC, such a pleasure to speak to you. Thanks for coming on the show again.
Thank you.
Over 411,000 players just competed in the first Pokemon Global Challenge for Pokemon Champions, and on top of all the top tiers like Sneasler, Mega Charizard, Incineroar, and others, stood one amazing Pokemon. Ariados, what? The historically low-tier, terrible, run-of-the-mill early route bug Pokemon Ariados won this? Yeah, we gotta talk about it. In this video, we will talk about the tournament Ariados won, the player whose team building genius brought out Ariados' maximum potential, and of course, what we can learn from all of this. This is the story of Federico Camporesi's Ariados, and to understand how everything built up to Ariados' win, we first must understand the format itself. For those uninitiated, Pokemon Champions uses the official format known as VGC, which is a doubles format where you have a team of 6 but bring 4 to a battle. Pokemon Champions not only has a limited pool of Pokemon, with it being the first season and literally only a month old at the time of this video, but also a limited pool of items. No choice items besides Scarf, no Covert Cloak, not even Assault Vest. The Global Challenge is a ladder-style tournament where players compete for 3 days with a limit of 15 games per day. Depending on how many points at the end of the 3 days you have, you will be placed in a ranking. Remember this because this will be important for later. The format is also best of 1, meaning if you get caught off guard by something, well, then you're just SOL. It is here where Federico, or Fede for short, decided to create his diabolical strategy, but it didn't actually start with Ariados. It actually started with the other 5 Pokemon. The most important part of Pokemon battling is arguably not the battle itself, as the preparation before a major tournament is crucial and constantly determines the results beforehand. Frequently, top players look at a metagame and try to understand the logic behind some of the most popular Pokemon combinations, subsequently electing a strategy outfitted to beat expected matchups or taking an already established strategy and making it their own. Fede's journey starts from not a place of love for Ariados as players suspect, but from his desire to adapt the age-old Fire Fairy combination. In fact, we reached out to Fede, and in his own words, this is why he elected that choice. Which, speaking of, thank you to Fede for allowing us to interview him for his insight. He's a great player, and you should check out his channels, which are in the description below.
Historically, Fire and Fairy has been like probably even the strongest combination of typings ever. Like they cover each other perfectly, and it's very strong to have them together on an offensive team. And stuff like Chi-Yu and Fluttermane, Primal Groudon and Xerneas, Incineroar, and any fairy type has historically been extremely strong.
Fede elected to try out the combination of Zardwai and Sylveon out of curiosity. This team had a powerful offensive spread move combination that was capable of dishing out ludicrous amounts of damage, while giving Fede a choice of a complementary Mega Evolution to Mega Charizard Y. In a limited metagame such as the current Champions landscape, the lack of useful items often means that a double Mega Stone is more often than not a requirement for success. Fede's choice of Sylveon as opposed to Mega Floette allowed Fede to open up a spot for one of Charizard Y's ultimate partners in crime, Mega Aerodactyl. Mega Aerodactyl's speed and ability to set up Tailwind often meant that Fede would have an edge with the offensive advantage that both Mega Flying types could bring into the mix. After that, Fede's team choices were centered around complementing the main core of the team.
I put Garchomp, which is just a perfect partner for both Mega Aerodactyl and Mega Charizard Y, and I picked up Sash Basculegion as my last choice because I feel like Basculegion in general is probably the strongest non-Mega Pokemon in the format. And I really like the Focus Sash set with Tailwind, but in general, I feel like whatever team you're running, there will almost always be room for Basculegion, and some set of Basculegion will be able to fit inside your team.
So good stuff, great results, right? But there were a couple of problems with bringing Sylveon over the much more popular, bulkier, and faster Mega Floette. Speed was obviously a factor when comparing the much slower Sylveon to the Ruinous Flower, but both Pokemon in fact share a natural predator. The most popular Pokemon in the format right now, just kidding, it's Sneasler now. Sneasler's ability to deal tremendous amounts of poison damage with Dire Claw while simultaneously dishing out status with its secondary effect made Fede take a look at a possible redirection.
There is not a very high amount of Pokemon that can redirect attacks with either Rage Powder or Follow Me in Pokemon Champions. Looking at the mons that learn Follow Me, I'm also looking at the list right now just to help myself, but we got only Meowsol and Clefable, and both are terrible for Sylveon because basically Clefable will just be repeating the fairy type, so it's not really useful to defend a Pokemon with a Director that has the same exact weaknesses as what you're trying to defend. And the same thing applies to Meowsol, which is basically weak to close combat. So every Pokemon that learns Follow Me in the format, it's weak to Sneasler in some way. So this was my main concern about it. And about Rage Powder, we got Volcarona, Scovillain, Sinistcha, Vivillon, and the GOAT Ariados. And basically, Ariados is the only Pokemon that learns Rage Powder and basically resists both Dire Claw and Close Combat. It resists Fight type 4 times, it resists Dire Claw 2 times, and all the other Redirectors will be weak to Dire Claw or at best just neutral damage.
And yes, we know what you're thinking. Why not just pick Sinistcha over Ariados, since Sinistcha redirects as well and takes similar damage from Dire Claw? We thought about that too, and Fede's answer surprised us.
But the thing is that Ariados is also immune to most of the RNG that Dire Claw can't get, because Sinistcha can both get poisoned and slapped from Dire Claw, while Ariados is a poison type with the Insomnia ability. So Ariados is immune to both poison and sleep. And that was extremely clutch and consistent against Nizzler. Because the only way that Nizzler could X you, it's paralyzing you.
Standing on the shoulders of giants, Ariados
That's actually kind of genius.
the memories of
Holy shit.
Pachirisu many years prior, a perfect answer to a common problem, a niche that only itself could fulfill. But that wasn't all. Ariados answered not one, but two of the scariest Pokemon in the metagame, as it possessed the mighty Knockoff.
And one other thing that it does in the Rain matchup is pressing Knockoff, which I have chosen to be my only attacking move. Knockoff into Basculegion is extremely valuable. It does around 40-50% damage, which is still a decent damage. And it removes the item, and basically it's always worth it. Whatever item the Basculegion is running, Rain team's Basculegion are always either Mystic Water or Choice Scarf. So removing the item to the Basculegion is something always extremely valuable. And a thing that has always helped a lot is that people seeing my Sylveon Ariados lead will pretty much always attack my Sylveon, not knowing Ariados could even do something to the Basculegion.
Ariados beat Sneasler's game plan clearly and also severely vibe-checked Basculegion, luring it into a false sense of safety, much like Spider do to their prey in the real world. Ariados even had one last trick up its sleeve, String Shot. Channeling the power of Bugcatcher Rick from the Viridian Forest, String Shot served as a secondary form of speed control that enabled Sylveon to press its stab Hyper Voice freely while controlling the opposition. String Shot particularly was better than Ariados' signature move Toxic Thread because it is a spread move, which, to be honest, I also did not know, because why would I ever use String Shot? But hey, sometimes the answers are in the beginning of our paths as trainers, and Fede's ability to look for solutions rewarded him with a victory on the largest stage in Pokemon history. But how did this strategy actually do at the tournament? The journey of every Spider hero always starts the same. You acquire your Spider powers, and then Uncle Ben has to die. In this case, Uncle Ben was Federico's first match, where he lost to some poor decisions. With great power must come great responsibility, and so Fede cleaned up his act and started shooting webs at everything and everyone that came across his team. Fede started winning, and he won a lot. Like a lot. Thus resulting in his day 1 record going 14-1. But day 2 proved to be a different experience for Fede, as he not only competed in the Global Challenge, but also entered another tournament with a significant prize simultaneously. Juggling 2 events is extremely mentally taxing, but to our friendly neighborhood Ariados user, this wasn't an impediment. But then the incident happened. Even if you are the very best, you can always fall prey to RNG in a game like Pokemon. And so at 21 wins and 2 losses, Fede's generational win streak was put to an end. So how did Fede react to such an upset when being so close?
And during these games, I went from 14-1 to 21-1. I lost a game to extremely heavy RNG, which made me go 21-2. And after losing that game, I just decided, okay, let's stop here. And on Sunday, I was playing the day 2 of that other tournament, but day 2 lasted much less than day 1. So my plan was just to hand the day 2 of the tournament, which also ended in top 8. So even the tournament went pretty well.
And thus Fede took a break when the signs to stop were there, which is a powerful piece of advice to those of us that start doom queuing under the pretense of just one more win and just one more for real. Truly the mettle of a champion. Although the first couple of days of the event had some hiccups for Fede, they were mostly a free ride, as he put it in the interview that we had to prepare for this video. But day 3 of the event was a whole different beast. As players progress throughout the tournament, they start encountering similarly rated opponents in the online ladder, thus making day 3 of the event by far the most complicated at a high level. This, however, didn't seem to faze Fede, as he was taking advantage of his ideal matchup into popular teams, even against the best players, and leveraging knowledge checks that decided several matches. Fede kept winning over and over, and he eventually reached a 31-2 record, a 94% win-loss record. Absolute efficiency. But even the most efficient and smart Pokemon champions, pun intended, eventually find a rival to match them. At this rate, Fede was bound to fight exclusively tough opponents, as he suddenly ran into the eventual second place finisher Daniel Thorpe. Fede brought his all against Daniel, but sadly it wasn't enough, and from here things got quite difficult. Fede began losing a decent amount of matches despite them being close battles. Now remember, this is a ladder tournament, so every loss makes the win rate go down significantly, and as if things weren't hard enough, with his current record now being 32 wins to 2 losses, Fede ran into brandishing his signature Parashong strategy with a dash of genius added to it with an extra Halucha plus Fisher Snorlax shell to top things off. The world champ difference made its mark. In an extremely grueling match, the 2016 world champion Wolf Glick managed to beat Fede in an all-out rager of a battle.
Wolf beat me with Perish. It was extremely close, but I didn't call some key turns well, as well as getting a little unlucky with some damage rolls. So I lost to Wolf, and then after losing to him, I ended up having 1 hour and 30 minutes searching a match without finding anyone. So I was desperate at this point.
Flustered, Fede desperately kept trying to look for matches to continue in the competition, despite close yet upsetting losses that could potentially bring him out of the podium.
I still kept searching after losing to Wolf, and I stopped my stream, which is why my very last 5 games were not streamed at all, because I just stopped my stream after multiple times without finding an opponent and just kept searching off camera.
As the clock kept ticking and the night turning really late, Fede decided to stop his stream because he wasn't sure if he would find anyone to play at this point. The air was still tense as his loss to Wolf had placed him at 10th on the ladder, but he still had 7 matches left to play. Fortunately, Fede eventually found 5 matches that were against top players who were using an alternate name, which was quite common, but his finals match was something else, an old rival of Fede's in the world of global challenges.
I cannot be sure about most of my other opponents who I played against, because literally everyone was playing with the anonymous trainer, but I know that my very last match, the match that just set me in first place and made me win the GC, was against Ubislow, who is the 2023 Japan national champion, and he is considered the best player in the world in best of 1 close team sheet. He's probably the strongest Battle Stadium ladder hero ever. It was a pretty tough opponent to face in the most important match, and I was sure it was him, even if he had the anonymous trainer, because it was his exact trainer card with his exact titles, his exact closes, his exact team, everything.
A fitting setting for the showdown that would decide the entire fate of the tournament. As Ubislow and Fede fought, there was actually someone that Fede didn't mention up until this point, who was actually his closest points competitor that was also playing his final match as well.
At some point, I had Suika, Joji Kaeda, who is another extremely good Japanese player, and usually me and him are considered the 2 best players in global challenges, because he won 4 global challenges, and win this one I won 3, so we are the 2 players with the most global challenges win. And at some point I saw that Joji was 0.1 points behind me. I will just send you the screenshot of that. I was just like, oh, Joji's coming.
The pressure for Fede was at an all-time high, facing off against the world's best player in the format while his closest rival is playing his final match at the same time. There was no way to tell who's going to win, so this time our spider hero made sure to not pull any punches. Remember how earlier in the video we talked about the importance of preparation and how a good analysis of the metagame can often decide the fate of an event? Well, Ubislow brought a popular Sableye Rain team to the final showdown for all the marbles. It was Fede's time to show that he did his homework with the spicy Ariados pick. So, how did it go?
Basically, he was playing that Sableye Rain team, and Ariados carried this last match. I cooked him with the Protect knockoff play I mentioned on the Basque Legion in Tour 1, and he just started spamming Rage Powder Hyper Voice right after, and this was my last match.
Spice was most definitely a key ingredient in Fede's ability to cook. There was one more step in the way, though, that Fede actually couldn't control. How did Joji's match go? Did Fede just beat the best in the world for absolutely nothing? Well, the news hit.
I was very scared in this moment. I was just sitting here until 4 a.m., keep refreshing the page to see if someone would pass me, but yeah. Basically, that was the situation when the rankings closed, but actually he played his last game and lost it. Yeah, I was not even 0.1 points above him.
I was playing Hades. I have played.
Pokemon Champions Global Challenge.
This is kind of like Hades, I guess. It's like a.
No one believed.
It's like a roguelike technically. You know what I mean? I mean Hades technically. Wait, am I technically lying? Like, look, I had a profile picture of Zagreus, and I'm playing a roguelike. It's technically Hades playing a roguelike. You know what I mean? Not that long, not that long.
in. But he saw beyond sight and felt the opportunity to bring Ariados to glory. And as promised, what can we learn from Fede's run? Well, there are 4 key takeaways. 1, preparation is definitely key. Always study before an event and try to understand the metagame so you can understand your team better.
A good
We've
one.
learned a lot of Spider-Man
Let's say,
analogies, but
I mean,
players should strive
Hades
to be more
or
of a
this game?
Batman with prep time. 2, consider all of your options. A thorough analysis allowed Fede to choose Ariados as the best
Equally
strategy. And if
for
a lot of players disregard weaker
Hades, I think, for let me check right now. Actually,
a loss is just a loss.
yeah, Steam, let me check.
Players tend to give up, rage, or even shake their mental game after a loss. But
Can't
losses are
understand.
human and a part of success.
I'm saying, basically, what game are you asking? What want to play? Hades or this one? Question. I think I've played. I haven't played it, but I haven't played it yet. But I've heard of it.
Rather than feel sorry, it is important to take a break if needed or make
It's the
adaptations.
climbing
This
game,
factor
right?
was key and
Yeah.
complemented the tournament.
It is pretty fun. Oh wait. Okay.
Run. 4, have fun. To the team at FSG, it was abundantly clear how Caparesi enjoys competitive Pokemon, and how his love and passion for the game pushed him to keep playing and eventually.
How'd you know?
And thank you so much to our platinum patrons. Thank you to Alex Sable, Spavoon, King Yabber, Megamon VGC,
Oh hell no!
Tyler, Schmooter.
Are you? Oh, how's the temperature there? Because it's already pretty. Let's see. Played quite a bit, I'd say. Played. Actually, let me see. Not really. I've played F1 recently. I used to play Valorant. I played a bunch of retro games. I played like the full Cars. ESP, that was pretty fun. Yeah. Played Hollow Knight, I played Silksong, I played the entirety of Silksong. It's really fun. Obviously I've played a lot of Hades. I think I've put at least 100 hours in Hades for sure. Yeah. Literally just checked it right now. I do not care about this. I literally only stream this, use it as a cloud, almost like a cloud service. Just to store my gameplay, because my laptop can't hold all that storage, and if I hit any good clips, I can just keep it for myself, especially when I play Valorant or F1, that's all. I'd like to see. I'm not really like a streamer or anything. I do not care about this. I am not spending like a single penny on this, bro. Like, this is just me being chilling on the open source stuff. That is all. I'm playing my music and knowing myself. Literally. The zero, like, you know, interest interest in any of that. I'm sorry, but not sorry.
There's not many people that have been in this van, only Misha, that have actually shared with Franz Hermann.
Ah, yes. The Franz Hermann.
And you are one of the.
I mean, you understand, right? I'm sorry if that's not what you wanted to hear, but it happens. Wait, actually, I used to have some panels. Wait, no. One sec. I have panels on my different overlay, like what this green thingy here. Look, I can do this stuff.
And we're heading for our third sprint weekend. That's
There you go. I'm a pro streamer now. Wow, that's crazy. You know what? Wait, be right back. Wow. Hey guys, I'm back. Wait. Is that what you wanted?
Only one practice session prior to quali on Friday afternoon. Teams will certainly have their work cut out for them. And please, could you check that you're subscribed, because about half of you aren't, and I don't want you missing out on future videos. Montreal's always tricky, but this year we're racing there 4 weeks earlier than last year. It will be cooler. No, colder, and we're looking at maximums between 16 and 20 degrees. But overnight, getting down to as low as 4. So keeping tyres warm will be a challenge, in particular the fronts, which will affect grip and confidence through the lap. And going back to 2024, it was so cold, we had hail here. This is going to throw up some very interesting weather. You remember last year, Kimi scored his first podium. A win this Sunday for the young Italian would be his first win in a row. Not bad for a teenager in his second year. So what should we be looking out for? Keep an eye on braking into turns 8 and 10. Bumps there, which could cause drama. Turns 3 and 4, we'll see cars riding those curbs with aggression. And weather-wise, as at today, forecast for just
Can you do this again? Not
50% chance. What about pit stops? Well, during the sprint race, expect 0. But come Sunday, pit stops.
Because you need that mega stone.
Is here. There's a 70% chance of a safety car and a 40%
What's your favorite Pokemon?
of a virtual safety
Once I play as a kid.
higher than the season's average. An early incident will probably result in a very long second stint, whilst a late intervention could trigger extra pit stops. And with that 50% chance of rain on Sunday, that could spice things up delightfully. Many of you remember the 2011 Canadian Grand Prix. Heavy rain, repeated safety cars, and a big delay led to Jenson Button coming from last to finish first in what became the longest 4 hours, 4 minutes and 39 seconds. Now that can't happen these days because there is a maximum time limit of 3 hours for any F1 race. That's 3 hours from start to crossing the finishing line. Another memorable Canadian GP was in 2019. You'll probably remember that Sebastian Vettel copped a controversial 5-second penalty. He crossed the line in front of Lewis Hamilton, but a penalty for joining unsafely handed the
Come on.
And that's when Seb decided to go and swap the number 1 and 2 boards in Parc Ferme. Classic Seb. Now, as at Monday afternoon, which is when I'm recording this video, there are still tickets available. The lowest price ticket at €216 was a Friday-only general admission. Most expensive? Paddock Club, €7,400. And the spectator experience is pretty good here. The hairpin grandstands create quite an amphitheatre feel. Overlooks one of the best overtaking spots on the circuit. And if you're there for Friday first practice, or the only practice session, look for the drivers giving you a wave on their outlap. Happens a lot, especially Lance Stroll, who was in front of his home crowd. The track is built on an island. It's 4.3 k's long, 14 turns, with much of it winding through trees. And that's where no spectators get a look. For us, photographing, it's a dream. We've got it all to ourselves. It's a bit like Bahrain and Qatar, where you have no one out the back of the track. But in Canada, it's much nicer scenery. And any wildlife? Yes, groundhogs, and a number of them. We spot them when we're doing our track walks. They dig underneath the fence. Last year, Lewis hit one during the race, and that caused damage to his car. He was upset post-race, but at the time, he didn't realise it was a groundhog that he hit. And in 2022, Carlos Sainz nearly hit one in a practice session. Spots to watch? Well, definitely the Wall of Champions, so named because Damon Hill, Michael Schumacher, and Jacques Villeneuve all crashed there in 1999. It's still as daunting and unforgiving as ever. And I can tell you, when you're shooting there very close to that wall, it is quite a thrill. Now, I mentioned Lance Stroll earlier on. He is a Quebecois, born and raised in Quebec. Is he loved by the locals? Look, he's not as popular, say, as Daniel or Oscar is in Australia or Lando Lewis in Britain. He still has a following, obviously, but he does cop a bit of flack from the locals about the gap between him and Fernando, his awkward media appearances, and the common paid driver boss's son narrative, which I think is a bit tough on the guy, and I hope he doesn't pay attention to that. He's quite open about the fact that he loves coming back here, obviously, for this race. He's quoted as saying he knows he's back home when he's waking up to pancakes and maple syrup, and he's a very big fan of Leicester's Deli. Says it's an institution, although I don't think you'll see him lining up there for a feed over Grand Prix weekend. What is his best result, I hear you cry, in Canada? A 7th, back in 2024. Although this year you certainly wouldn't be putting any money on him to equal or beat that, given the very poor start that Aston Martin's got off to this season. My first time here in Canada was in 2017, and I remember the autograph sessions that they had on the Thursday in pit lane. That doesn't happen anymore at Formula One. But the city itself has one of the best buzzers of any F1 city, particularly on Friday and Saturday nights. If you get down to Sherbrooke Street in town, it's an iconic street in Montreal. It shuts down over the race weekend, becomes a pedestrian zone. But bring a jacket. Now, if you want to see a driver, where should you go? Obviously at the track, but in the city, if you head around to the 5-star hotels, I'm talking the likes of the Ritz-Carlton, Four Seasons, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday and Saturday nights. If there's a crowd of a couple hundred people out the front, trust me, there are drivers there. And it's a good atmosphere too. I sometimes head there Wednesday night to go and do some interviews with those locals who are waiting for drivers, and I must say, it is a very joyous atmosphere down there. And some of the drivers will stop and sign autographs. Sunday night, definitely not because of Canada's jock tax. That's an industry term. It relates to pro athletes, performers who work or perform in Canada. Might involve municipal income taxes based on the number of days in the country. So a top driver, say earning 40 million a year, can save plenty by leaving the country before.
What is so?
What about getting to and from the track? Well, most people take the metro, but there are often long lines coming over that bridge, and I can see that when I'm photographing from the grandstand at the hairpin. Of course, heading out is probably worse because everybody leaves at about the same time, whereas in the morning they arrive at different time. But if you're staying for the concerts, and this is the rundown for the concerts for the weekend, you'll find crowds a lot thinner when you leave after those events. We used to have a bridge and a floating pontoon across the rowing lake, which is behind the hospitality suite, but they decided to put the driver's car park up the end of the lake. So speaking of bridges, this one between turns 8 and 9 along the back of the track wasn't high enough above the track to be deemed safe when the FIA issued new safety regulations in 2023. So they couldn't raise the bridge. Instead, they dropped the track. Problem solved. If you're wondering how the drivers get to the track, most of them will drive, although a number come on 2 wheels. Lewis last year came on his Ducati. The likes of Valtteri will ride a bike, probably. Sebastian Vettel's also ridden bikes. Pierre Gasly rode a scooter because the traffic can be deadly coming in and out of the track. Over the years, I've come to like this race. Don't love it just yet. I like the buzz in the city. I think it's great for fans, and of course the weather often spices things up out at the track. I've got nothing else to say now, so I'm going to ask you to please hit that like button, and those unsubscribe. Pressing this button will ensure you don't miss out on future content. I'm just going to stop now. Thanks for watching and stay patient.
Right now, with 1 point to his name in comparison to Behrman's 17. And that's just 4 races, of course. Up the end of the year. Oh, I don't hear the usual rebuttals or rebuffs. There's been no attempt to throw a duvet over the noise and pretend it doesn't exist. Instead, we've seen something far more objective and partly why Haas made the decision to hire engineer as their team principal, to take themselves away from any of that chatter. And instead, it points towards the argument I had at the beginning of the year that there is a love triangle within Haas Formula One team, that Ferrari wants something, Toyota wants something, and Haas is very much the little twink. And Ocon's not really done much recently for either of those parties to say, ugh, fine, Ocon can stay for another year. But okay, let's pull back for a second here, because the progression of Haas in the last 10 years is something that many fans may not fully understand, especially if you're relatively new to Formula One. So allow me to enlighten you, and for the older fans, to remind you. When Haas entered in 2016, the model was obvious. A very close relationship with Ferrari meant clever buying and a solid power unit, as well as the gearbox, rear suspension, and whatever the regulations would allow them to actually buy from the Scuderia. You don't try to out-engineer Mercedes from a business park with 12 people and a prayer candle, so instead, you out-purchase the rules and you get a trusted chassis builder. Come Australia, you score on debut. Nice! That whole story between Gunther Steiner, Stefano, Gene Haas, it's a really fascinating story that Gunther does play out in many of his books, and it's certainly something that captured a specific moment that F1 was really trying to make sure they had at least 10 teams in the sport. It was a really good shortcut, and it worked very, very well to the point where Haas was 5th in the Constructors in 2018. But sure enough, that didn't last for long. Many complaints were had, and then there were rule changes that made that customer model far more untenable, and it meant that Haas had to start making more of their own stuff. And then wouldn't you know it, come 2019, it was more than just the whole rich energy saga Haas was starting to do badly. More specifically, the fact their tyres wouldn't last. And as a result of their prior arrangement no longer meaning the same as it used to, the team went from a credible competitor to the best of the rest into a bit of a meme. And then come 2021, a laughingstock. And I don't think many people in 2016 were really thinking that, yes, Haas is going to be the ultimate Ferrari Academy finishing school, because arguably, Sauber was more likely to be able to have that, since their relationship with Ferrari went back even further. I mean, yes, of course, we did see Esteban Gutierrez returning to Formula One, since he did have Ferrari links, even though he was dropped by Sauber. And then, of course, we saw Charles Leclerc doing some FP1 mileage with them before he then got his ticket with Sauber. But still, at the time, we really thought that, is this really the place where Ferrari's going to put people on debut, or is it just a matter of convenience that, well, we're already busy with Sauber. Hey, Gunther, will you take these guys for an FP1 session? Oh, Gutierrez, give them a second chance. Yeah, okay. And then it didn't help that the Viking became available either. Simply put, Haas was not the clean Ferrari pipeline. Then Komatsu-san arrived, with Toyota following not long after. And Haas started to look more like a political intersection. Ferrari on one side and Toyota on the other. Credit where it's due there. That's a really wild place for F1's smallest team to end up in. They spent years being treated like the paddock's folding chair, and now two major manufacturers have reasons to care what happens inside that garage. And right in the middle sits Esteban Ocon. No ties to either Ferrari or Toyota. No manufacturer sponsor backing him to the hilt. And in reality, he hasn't really been the team leader Haas probably expected him to be. And what was really surprising is that, really, Komatsu-san was very much unlike any other team principal. I mean, come on, look at what we got over at Red Bull with Christian Horner when a driver's time was up. He would still defend them up until he wouldn't. Most teams just tend to give diplomatic fog, as in Formula One tofu, as in it's soft, it's flavourless, it's technically a denial, but really, is there much substance to it unless you really find a way to pepper it with substance? No, it's not. But Komatsu-san doesn't do that. In February of this year, he was already on record about Ocon's previous year, saying for sure, nobody is satisfied with Esteban's sporting result last year, and that really threw me at the time. It didn't help that Ocon really didn't seem gelled with the car through testing, whereas Behrman did, as well as the opening phase of the season when Behrman was making numbers and fighting Red Bulls. There's been no visible effort to stifle the noise around his seat. No, we fully support Esteban. He's just let the story breathe. And some of you might just say, well, that's just the engineer mind at work, being direct and to the point, and that's fair enough. I mean, that might be why Gene hired him in the first place. Hire from within and hire somebody who's not an absolute drama king. Because ultimately, it may not matter what Ayo Komatsu thinks of Esteban Ocon. It really depends on what Haas needs from that second seat in 2027. It's become even bigger than what the team principal thinks of that particular driver. The original speculation that, oh, Esteban Ocon's not liked by Komatsu-san. Who cares about that? If Haas doesn't care, because there are two major boardrooms at play here, and the first one is in Maranello. They are right now, Haas, the closest thing that Ferrari has to a B team, given that Sauber's now become Audi and taken all their toys with them, with Oliver Behrman arguably being the best academy driver Ferrari's put in that team at the moment. Certainly helped that in 2024, Behrman jumped into a Ferrari at Saudi with one practice session and finished P7, and then partook in 6 practice sessions that year as well. He was ready to go. Because, yeah, Jeddah was just one of those drives, you know. It doesn't really matter which nationality the driver is from. It's just one of those moments when you look at it and what they were able to do in that car with that amount of experience or lack thereof, and you're thinking, oh yeah, that driver's going places. Sort of like how Sebastian Vettel in that BMW Sauber in 2007, bagging points on debut around that track. Everyone just went, oh yeah, he's going to be in Formula One soon. And sure enough, with Toro Rosso, he was. Because Behrman and Vettel had something. And that something is easily hovering over Ocon's head at the moment, given the lack of results. Because right behind him, we do have Rafael Camara, who is knocking on the door of Formula One with plenty of credentials behind him. Him being the Formula 3 champion, and him doing that with one race weekend to spare. And in Formula 3, that's basically unheard of. And right now in Formula 2, he's got back-to-back podium, and he's already got plenty of super license points to his name. So even if he's only in the top 3, he's certainly destined for Formula 1. And that's great as far as I'm concerned. Having another Brazilian on the grid? Brilliant. And this is where the Ferrari logic gets really, really clean. Behrman keeps building at Haas, and if a Ferrari seat opens later, he's the next obvious internal candidate. Rafa becomes the natural next name for Haas, and Ferrari keeps a junior presence at the team all the way through to when its engine deal expires at the end of 2028. The pipeline does what the pipeline's supposed to do. And then there's another variable that makes Toyota's path through all of this considerably cleaner, and it has nothing to do with Ocon, because the other boardroom is Toyota's, and I don't think you need me to tell you the clue is now in the name. TGR Haas. And then next year it's probably going to be known as Toyota Racing Haas, because the TGR name, it is being phased out by the parent company, because they very much, Toyota, want to get back into full-fat competition. We've already seen it in WEC, we'll see it in F1 next year. And I think it's safe to say that now, almost 2 years since the first announcement, Toyota has done absolute wonders for the overall future of the Haas Formula One team, in that This partnership has offered technical expertise and opportunities that the team couldn't expect to have had when they cut ties with Gunther Steiner. The fact is now, they have a simulator at their workshop. That is something that Haas had never had before. They've now got their own TPC program at the Fuji Speedway. They've got a track to themselves, as well as now a little bit of a testing program, which in of itself is amazing. Not to mention, Ryo Hirakawa, who is a Toyota driver, is getting loads of free practice time, and I'm pretty sure that Kamara might get a couple of sessions too. It really depends on what happens and whether or not Ferrari wants to give that time towards Rafa, or give it to Bogdanovic, or somebody else. And look at the official language that came around with the press release and the enhancement of the relationship between Toyota House. People, product, pipeline. And Toyota's been ramping up their racing efforts across the board, in F1 especially, likening it to almost a jewel in the crown. And when their main man, Akio Toyoda himself, spoke at the announcement in December, he said, "The time has come for the next generation to take their first steps toward the world stage." Yeah, maybe he was talking about the simulator, maybe he was talking about other racing disciplines, and maybe I'm the Archbishop of Milton Keynes. Then Komatsu-san was asked whether or not Toyota had floated the idea of maybe having a bit more influence regarding one of the seats it has, given that Ferrari has control over one of them themselves. And the answer came almost immediately. And here it is for your consideration. Yeah, of course. Their goal, one of many goals, is developing people. One of them is drivers. Even from Akio's son. Even though he wanted, let's say, a Japanese driver from his academy, it becomes a joke if we're putting that driver when he's not good enough. Then people will say, oh, Toyota's just buying a seat with money. That's not what Akio-san is doing. Chairman himself getting involved. Right, okay, I'm gonna pick up the phone for this one. Because saying performance comes first is both true and incredibly convenient. It lets everyone appear neutral while waiting for the sporting argument to give them cover. Points mean prizes and all that, but notice what Io Komatsu doesn't say. He doesn't say Toyota had zero interest in the seat. He said the driver needs to deserve it. The gate exists, and now it's a case of which driver walks through it. Is it going to be Jack Doohan? Is it going to be Ryo Hirakawa, since he does technically hold an FIA super license? Or maybe it might be someone else within Toyota's ranks. Or maybe it might be both Ferrari drivers. Or maybe Ocon survives an entire season. But if you think about it, Ocon doesn't really benefit in the majority of scenarios. But let's be fair to him. He is a race winner with serious pedigree. He survived Alpine politics, just about, which is basically a motorsport escape room with worse lighting. Not to mention, he didn't arrive in Formula One with a silver spoon attached to him. He is a very big feel-good story, and he races like his life depends on it. And maybe that's part of the issue, in that every single weekend, he's fighting for his life and overdrives the car sometimes, which has led to his reputation. And it's sort of the same thing that Liam Lawson has been experiencing, in that he picked beef in the beginning of his career with the wrong drivers with a huge fan base, and those fan bases do not forget. And the fact he has got podiums to his name, and he does have a race win to his name, barely 100 drivers in Formula One can actually say that about their careers. This is just the case of maybe a pretty good driver realizing that pretty good is not good enough when you've got the titans of Ferrari and Toyota breathing down your neck. Especially when it becomes politically useful. It gets to a point when everyone within the paddock and maybe out there in social media is saying, what is you being in that seat doing to somebody's future? Because Ferrari could have 2 Ferrari Academy drivers waiting to go once Lewis Hamilton decides to call time. Then of course Toyota has Ryo Hirakawa. They do have Jack Doohan as well, in case Hirakawa ultimately is not the man for the job. And yes, you could argue that Ocon does have plenty of experience, and experience can buy you protection, but let's be real here. 1 point is not going to buy you very much kudos within the Haas garage now, is it? And the thing about this is that I'm providing you objective facts, statistical truth.
What is happening?
17. Right now, when things are getting spicy, Ocon is going to have to dazzle to keep the seat for next year. And yes, I am going to touch upon Lewis Hamilton because he could be a very exciting variable in all of this. In the midst of all of his bad times last year, Hamilton told the media he had a pretty long contract to Ferrari, saying it would go through 2027 with an option beyond that in his hands rather than Ferrari's. If that holds, there's no Ferrari vacancy and no real need to extract Behrman from Haas. That's fine for Komatsu-san, Oliver's already proven his worth multiple times now. So I'll get the spanner out for this one. The scenario where Hamilton stays is also the scenario where Toyota's path opens up. Ferrari can leave Behrman in place as Haas's obvious leader. Toyota's acknowledged driver ambition stops competing with Ferrari's pipeline and starts filling the vacuum it leaves. And this is where the love triangle really crystallizes, and it makes it an incredibly precarious situation for Esteban. But there is a scenario where Ferrari could use its goodwill within Haas for one last gasp before potentially moving on to another team, and get really aggressive in that it could, again, take both seats, especially if Camara goes on to be either second or the F2 champion, when he has to, as the champion, move out of the category. But alternatively, we could almost see the beginning of the end of the partnership with Ferrari as well, because they could easily see one of the seats on fire and then decide, you know what, we can let Toyota have that one, we don't really care. Because, yeah, I'm pretty sure that Ferrari's still interested in what goes on over at Haas, but you've also got to remember who is another customer of Ferrari, that being, of course, Cadillac, and their reserve driver being a Ferrari Academy man himself, Zhou Guanyu. And politically speaking, Cadillac's a very shiny object, an American manufacturer with deep pockets and long-term ambition. The market F1 spent years trying to crack and has done so, albeit a little too thirsty looking for my tastes. That being said, Ferrari doesn't need to cool on Haas for Cadillac to really count here. It only needs another relationship that feels more strategically exciting. Every degree of attention that Cadillac is one less reason to fight every final battle over at Haas. I'm not saying there's going to be some kind of dramatic divorce or anything. It's going to be more like the relationship will start to cool off, and maybe, in the fullness of time, especially if General Motors holds off their engines for 2029, a sort of reason to have one of their Ferrari drivers in a Cadillac should Bottas or Perez decide to retire. And in that situation, keeping things cool regarding Haas politics with Ferrari is good enough. And now, let's explain why Komatsu-san has been relatively neutral when it comes to talking about the future of both of their drivers, or backing their drivers really publicly and really vehemently. Because in this situation, he really doesn't need to say anything. He doesn't have to pick a side. He doesn't have to talk about which side actually has more favour. Instead, he can keep things objective, performance-related. And when you keep things performance-related, you can't really argue against it because, well, the results speak for themselves. And when you've got 1 point versus 17 points, that is something you really can't argue against unless you get into the real nitty-gritty and talk about, well, there was this and then there was that. The fact is, though, is that Ocon didn't get those points. And that is the cold, hard truth of Formula One. Sometimes Formula One doesn't care about your feelings. It cares about how many points you would get. All Komatsu-san then says that results just need to improve, and he's right. For Ocon, the results do need to improve. He doesn't need to comment about Kamada or Hirakawa or Doohan or anything like that. He can just get on with the job of developing his team and just say, hey, as long as the drivers are bringing in the results, I'm okay with both. And right now, I'm pretty sure he's not okay. And right now, it's very much on the fence with Esteban, because the sporting and political arguments are pointing the same direction. And when that happens, drivers tend to disappear very quickly. Then everyone acts shocked afterwards, as if the warning signs weren't obvious, but in truth, it was going to be a tall order. But there is still time though. He needs to dazzle for the rest of this year, not be fine or respectable. He really needs to have a clean weekend, or a really good weekend. And far fewer of those weekends go, oh, well, actually, if you think about the tyre strategy and all of that stuff, or they put him out at that wrong time in Q1, people start to go, yeah, you're coming up with excuses. And we all make fun of racing drivers for coming up with excuses. What people really need right now, especially in 2026, is just the facts. Did they score points? No, they did not. Can we find a driver who might do better or have better upside? We might do. Why not give that a go? What Ocon needs to do is make that seat politically unavailable. Get Haas their first podium. That's what he needs to do. To get it to the point where Io goes to both boardrooms and say, hey, look, I know you want to get this driver in alongside Behrman, but I mean, Ocon just got us our first podium, guys. There's a lot more upside here. He might get another one, and then we'll get more prize money, and we'll be even better. So, look, can we just try him out for one more year? Haas's first podium, and Esteban gets it, and then they boot him out? That's not going to curry good favour now, is it? It wouldn't be fair. Although if you really want to dig in the nitty-gritty, you can go, oh, actually, it was Chloe Chambers that got Haas their first ever podium in a Formula One related event. You know what I mean. No disrespect to Chloe, by the way. She did a really good job in that season. But the point being is that the first act that Esteban has shown in 2026 is just not been good enough. Because yes, Behrman absolutely knocked it out of the park in the first two Grand Prix. And then you look at Ocon, yes, he did bag a point, but then you look at what else happened, and there were incidents, messy qualifying sessions, all of the bad luck and all of the negative circumstances in the world that's befallen that driver. It just reminds me of Magnussen in 2023 when he looked absolutely lost. And that's really, really bad when you've got Ferrari reps and Toyota reps giving you the evils in the garage and thinking, you're taking up one of our seats, mate. You are really going to be counting your days soon. And if Haas trails off in terms of development, which could easily happen and has happened before, and Alpine rises with Mercedes power, that only sharpens the irony considering that Ocon could be squeezed out at Haas powered by a team that actually used to back him and gave him a second chance with Renault in 2020. Yeah, F1 does enjoy a sick little joke every now and again. Meanwhile, while the internet got its undies in a twist over the mistranslation regarding his future, Kamara was on the F2 podium again. Ocon's upstairs in the F1 garage exposed and sitting on 1 point, and Behrman showing no sign of going anywhere. And then we got the Brazilian driver adding to the conversation that Kerasoli, the journalist, was actually having, and that just makes it a far more engaging and fun story for me to talk about, because I didn't want to make a script that was just going, oh, Ocon's on the way out. Why? Because one journalist said so. I found it more appealing to think, oh, well, this came out, but then, oh, no, wait, it was actually about this. Well, why is that the case then? And why is Kamara actually being talked about? And oh, yeah, that guy. This is the first rumours of him actually getting into the seat next year, because if he is not in the conversation about Formula One next year, Rafa, it'd be incredibly bizarre. And yes, again, you could point to the Hamilton retirement rumours, but the way that Lewis has been speaking recently, it sounds like he's feistier than ever. Like he wants to try and gain control and gain some charge of his own destiny at Ferrari. It doesn't seem like he's about to throw in the towel. The clearer read night now is that Behrman's going to stay put and Ocon is going to have a tall order to keep that seat for next year, or it could be easily someone affiliated with Toyota. And Komatsu-san's going to be saying very little because the numbers can speak for him, and quite frankly, that's probably the best thing he needs to do. And he's relatively objective with Behrman as well, because after that Suzuka crash, you expected him to defend Oliver to the hilt, saying it was all Franco's fault, but he didn't do that. He just went, well, that's what the regulations produce. That's just where we are. He looked at the data and it was like, it's just the way it is, mate. Sorry, I'm not going to give you the soundbite that you were craving. And Crofty must have been really sore about that. And of course, there's always Jack Doohan, because if Ocon gets replaced by Jack again, at that point, Doohan is just Ocon's recurring nightmare and nobody asked for that storyline. Either way, Ocon's fighting the room, and I think the F1 world is done with him unless he bags that P3. And I think you will like this storyline over here, and that's coming up next. I'll just go and freshen myself up and I'll be right with you.
Okay, I'll deal for some reason there. Nice. Just barely. I'll take that. What point of this was? Oh. I didn't even realize what you did there. What? Let's finish this one. Anyway. Yes. Excellent. When did this happen? Psychic Surge. You didn't have this before. Your Neuro Force, which was also good. Yeah, Psychic Surge. That's it. Oh man, the art that here looks very nice. This might be the. We don't have expanding force in this. So boss. Hypnosis. These are bro. Let's try it first. We only really need. Yeah. Get this. $60. 15. 75. Ultronics accuracy. Set. And we don't even need a photo of him. Yeah. Good. This is true. So it's very God garden, but we can get moon stuff from. What do you mean? What is the fracture? This might have to put. Sure. up? Oh, I thought that would be dope. Nice. I might have one to see this coming besides that one. Oh, that'd be nice. Perfect. Big shit. Nice. Nice. What the fuck? What the fuck? It's back. That's a deja. Really,